it's me, Sprady, and welcome back to my channel. So I've been playing the Dead Space remake for a couple of days now. I haven't really played enough to warrant a full review, but I just thought I'd discuss some of my early impressions of the little bit of the game that I have played. As you may know, Dead Space, the original Dead Space, came out in 2008, which was 15 years ago. It was, honestly, when I played it, it was one of the scariest games I'd ever played, and I think it still holds that title for me. Now in 2023, we have a full Dead Space remake, thanks to EA's Motive Studio, and while it is a remake that has been built from the ground up, there are some differences. The core story is the same, but there are some differences along the way, both when it comes to gameplay and the narrative. If you aren't familiar with the narrative, it follows ship systems engineer Isaac Clarke as he volunteers for an emergency response mission, as him and a crew on board the ship called the Killian investigate what is happening with the planet cracker ship, the USG Ishimura. It's not just about the ship though. Isaac's girlfriend Nicole is also on board the ship, so he also wants to find out what's happened to her since all communications have ceased. As the Killian closes in on the Ishimura, there is a bit of a malfunction with the docking system and they do kind of crash and leaves them somewhat stranded. When they do go on the ship though, they discover that the crew is nowhere to be found, and also it's overrun by some alien-like creature, undead alien-like creatures called necromorphs, and they are literally everywhere. And eventually the group gets separated, and Isaac, being an engineer, trying to survive, he uses what tools he can find, the first one being a plasma cutter, and uses it to defend himself against any necromorphs that decide to attack him. Eventually it feels like a battle of all the necromorphs versus Isaac alone, even though that isn't really the case, but it generally feels that way because the ship is empty and all you can find are these necromorphs. I mentioned before that there are some differences to the remake, both with the narrative and also the gameplay. So with the narrative, certain people's fates might be different. They might die in a different way, or you might have more interactions between characters than there were before, and this kind of fleshes them out quite nicely. Plus there are little side objectives when Isaac is exploring the ship and he discovers like a holo video of Nicole, and he gets more insight as to what was going on on the Ishimura before everything went kind of haywire. Also, Isaac isn't a mute this time around. In the first game, the original game, he didn't speak. There were screams and there were grunts from stomping and dying, and in Dead Space 2 and 3 then you had a voice actor, and this was done by Gunnar Wright, who is the voice actor for Isaac in Dead Space 2 and 3, and he has returned in the remake to reprise his role. And honestly, I feel like this was a good call because it helps with the storytelling a lot more. Honestly, I quite like Dead Space 2 over the first one. The first one is terrifying and the second one is more action and horror, but I prefer the storytelling experience where there's actually a voice character. When it comes to the gameplay, there are also changes, as I mentioned, and while it still takes place from an over-the-shoulder perspective, there are some changes with how things play out in the chapters. So there are new puzzles that have been put in place, and weapons sometimes arrive earlier or come with a tutorial this time around, which is so much better. The puzzles themselves, what I've noticed in these first few chapters, is they're called circuit breakers. You have to remove power from one thing to give power to another thing. Say you want to turn the lights off to use the elevators, and this adds such another layer of terror because you're thinking that you have to walk through this dark section and you don't know what's going to jump out at you, it's just infinitely more terrifying when it's in the dark. Like, I don't know if it's just me or is it everyone else, but that's how it felt for me. I felt so much more petrified when things were coming at me in the dark. I didn't know where they were coming from. And it's not just about the dark either. Sometimes you need to turn off the oxygen for the lights to work, or turn off the oxygen for a door in the distance to work. And obviously on the way back to the door, when the oxygen is running out, there's like a small army of enemies that you have to get through, and it just adds more tension to the situation because you're trying to balance both your oxygen. Generally it's about 70 seconds for you to get from point A to point B and deal with the enemies in between, and it works really well in delivering that kind of tension that you'd expect from a game like this. Another cool addition that was actually present in Dead Space 2 and not so much the original game is that you can use kinesis to pick up objects and hurl them at your enemies. While kinesis was used in the first game to kind of solve puzzles, it wasn't used as a weapon. Whereas in Dead Space 2 you could throw explosives, or once you've killed an enemy with a sharp appendage, you could rip off that sharp appendage and then fire it at his body and pin him to the wall. That kind of gameplay is now in this remake, and when I booted it up, I was like, I wonder if it's gonna work like that. And then I got the kinesis module, and I was like, let's try and throw something. And I managed to pin something against the wall, and it just works really well. It gives you another weapon when you're trying to conserve ammo, or if you just want to do big damage very quickly, and it is incredibly satisfying. The biggest upgrade is obviously the visuals and the sound design. I would say the sound design as well. The game looks incredible, and the way they've used lighting, or the lack of lighting sometimes, as it has you on the edge of your seat. Sometimes you can't see a couple of meters in front of you, and all you have are the lights on your plasma cutter or one of your other weapons that you have. Additionally, the sound design is crazy. Just the sound of the weapons and just hearing a monster kind of, I don't even know, snarling behind you. It just sounds incredible. And also the way Isaac stomps, just the sound effect of the stomp itself is brutal. It's just, I had such a good time with this game. I'm having such a good time with this game. And aside from that, the music just has my hair standing on end when I feel like something's coming. When there's like foreshadowing about something about to happen, it's like someone plucking on violin strings, and it's just so unsettling. But you know something's coming. It hasn't come to you yet, but you know it's about to happen, and you just get you back up, and you feel like you need to defend yourself immediately. So those are my early impressions of the Dead Space remake. I will have a full review at some point, which will probably be more well articulated compared to this me speaking off the cuff kind of thing. I just haven't had the most time to play. I only got the code a few days ago, but I am having a good time with it. But if you did enjoy this, please don't forget to hit like, and if you're new here, please don't forget to subscribe as well. And if you are planning to get your hands on the Dead Space remake, please let me know. Did you play the original game? Are you very excited? How are you feeling about it? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.